A colleague from Calgary was here last week, and he was saying that we shouldn't underestimate Alberta's anger. Do you have the same feeling up in Edmonton, that anger is really as serious as Mr. Kenney is saying?
So there's some anger on the prairies, and there's always some anger everywhere. But I can assure you, first of all, that I'm a Canadian first, and that there is very little, if any, interest in any of this separatist or divisive discourse in Edmonton, or as near as I can tell among northern Albertans. But speaking for Edmontonians, I think we're very interested in making Confederation work. We're very interested in this country's success, which is Alberta's success, which is Edmonton's success. And so I think there is anger, but I think that anger comes from anxiety and fear about economic uncertainty. And I think this is why we need a strategic partnership through initiatives like the West Task Force, where local government leaders can bring solutions forward to the federal government and provincial governments. And ideally, all three of us can work together, along with Indigenous organizations and industry, to actually make life better and inject some hope, which is really the antidote to this anger and creates the rife conditions for the divisiveness that is being exploited for narrow and short-term political reasons.
So what are the solutions? Did you have any ideas about how to offer hope? You talk about anxiety in the energy sector. Are there any concrete ideas out there?
Sure. So, I think one of the most pressing questions for many people on the prairies is TMX actually happening? And I believe it is, because of the Prime Minister has assured me personally, and I believe him, that they wouldn't have bought it if they didn't intend to go ahead. And Minister Sohi, former Minister Sohi, is a longtime Edmonton City Councillor. We were elected together. In his work with First Nations in the West and with the energy industry to get that pipeline through all of the complex regulatory and consultation requirements. I believe very sincerely, and I had dinner with him last week, that he did that work because the government is committed, and he was dispatched to get the project to the finish line. So I believe, even though there are still voices saying it'll never happen and casting doubt over that, which adds more anxiety, that this federal government means to build this pipeline, and that when shovels go in the ground and workforces are spooling up now to do this, that will quell some of the anxiety, because I think they did mean it all along, and it's actually a shame that there's still some doubt about that.
Isn't TMX hiring people? Isn't TMX right near where you are?
Yeah,
Can't
yeah.
you just go over and look at it?
No, they're setting up and getting ready to go. They've got to conclude one last legal matter, but again, Minister Sohi, who I know personally and believe strongly in his integrity, worked very hard on a mission to deal with all of those questions and concerns from First Nations in a respectful way. That's who he is, and it's unfortunate he didn't have a chance to continue his work, but that's what the voters of Edmonton Millwoods decided. But I absolutely believe that he did that work sincerely, and that his important role in delivering TMX will be honored in time.
Will that do a long way to deal with Western alienation, or do you still have to deal with the bills that C-69, C-48 that are problematic in the West?
So I think we've heard from Minister Wilkinson and from the Prime Minister that there's a willingness to take feedback from industry and from producers and from local elected officials and even from premiers about the implementation of C-69. So that's one of the things the task force will look at, is whether there are some tangible things that could go some way to ameliorate some of the anxiety that arose from that legislation. And so I think there's openness, and I think there's room for constructive discussions. But in the long term, I think the bigger question is, in 30 years from now, when the world is using a lot less of our hydrocarbons for fuel, hopefully they're still using them for plastics and advanced materials and other things, but as the global demand shifts around conventional energy and unconventional energy, what are Albertans and people in Saskatchewan and northern BC going to be doing for a living? And I think that long-term economic vision is what we have an opportunity through our West Task Force, and ideally working with provinces and the federal government to articulate a hopeful future so that my kids, when they're my age, have jobs. Because we can't assume that the jobs that are there today are necessarily the jobs of the long term. We need to get the most out of our resource economy today as the world makes that transition, and so that we can get a world price for our products so that we can invest those dollars in economic diversification so that when the world's energy mix changes, we're still relevant in the world economy.